View from the Gutters, Episode 50, Part 3. Welcome to View from the Gutters, the comic book podcast where each episode we discuss a collected edition, trade paperback, or graphic novel, and then recommend and vote on the book for the next episode. Warning: the discussion portion of this show has massive spoilers for that book. On this episode, we discuss Infinite Crisis. And stay tuned for next week when we discuss the Manhattan Projects. Welcome back, guys. Episode 50, Part 3.
Crisis on Infinite Podcast.
Crisis on Infinite Podcast. I'm Andrew Chard.
I'm Joe Preddy.
I'm Tobiah Panchin.
And I'm Kate Reynolds. And now, back to Toby for some special announcements.
Yeah.
I guess I have two special announcements that aren't really that special. The first announcement is if you're listening to the latest episode, and it's this one, and you haven't listened to 50.1 or 50.2, go back and download the two episodes before this, because this is the end of our conversation.
Yeah.
We did a special 3-part episode this week, and this is part 3.
Yeah.
So
And
if you're listening to this first, you're in the wrong place.
Yeah, we're going to be referencing those other conversations, so you'll want to hear those.
Pretty heavily, I think. And announcement number 2 is if you've never read Infinite Crisis before, which is what we're talking about on this episode, and you read it without reading any of the 6 different miniseries that led into it between Identity Crisis and Infinite Crisis, and you had no fucking clue what was going on in Infinite Crisis, I am so very sorry. Because I totally forgot how much this comic relies on you having read those other things to understand what's going on. And I think that that's an excellent point for us to jump right into in our conversation in terms of the difference between Crisis on Infinite Earths, where you can jump right in and it's okay, things are happening and I know what's going on, and maybe I don't know all these characters, but I'm following along in the story.
Right.
And this, 20 years later, where you jump into it and it's wow, all this shit is going on, and I have no fucking clue what's happening.
It's literally, you start in the middle of a story.
Yeah, you really do.
You really do. And we joke a lot on the show about the 16-book reading list that I gave Matt before he could read 52, but this book is the setup to 52. If you just finished reading this book, congratulations, you now get to read one of my favorite things that DC ever did, which is 52. Matt was like, I want to read it, and I was like, okay, well, you should read the book before it. Unfortunately, the book before it, Infinite Crisis, the book we're talking about right now, really does need at least 6 or 8 tie-in books to make it make sense.
You gotta read the 4 countdown to Infinite Crisis tie-ins: OMAC Project,
Day of Vengeance, Rand Thanagar War, and Villains United.
I meant Secret Society, but yeah.
It is, yeah.
But there's also
Superman.
There's also Sacrifice, which is the Superman Wonder Woman thing.
And I also recommend reading.
But some of that is put into the other trades, Joe.
No, it's not. Those are all different. Sacrifice, one issue is in OMAC Project. Yeah. But that's it.
Oh, okay. I thought the others were as well.
Isn't there a bunch of stuff that happens in Justice League as well?
Yeah, the 2 Justice League books, Crisis of Conscience and whatever 19 is, it's across the room, but I'm not going to go grab it, is those 2 are the 2 in between Identity Crisis and Infinite Crisis.
Yeah.
And those also tie in. So that's 8 books. Plus Infinite Crisis, that's 9 books of the 16-book reading list I gave Matt, which I also recommend reading Rebirth, because Rebirth happens between Identity Crisis and Infinite Crisis, which I forgot that happens.
And so if you didn't read Rebirth, you have no idea why Hal Jordan's floating around doing his stupid things.
Yeah. So this is, in my opinion, everything that's wrong with modern crossover events.
I feel like I want to make a disclaimer. Read those books, and Superboy Prime will still be the worst fucking character ever in this book. All right, it's totally just Geoff Johns masturbating everywhere. And
everything about this book is about Geoff Johns
masturbating everywhere. Yeah, this is Crisis on Infinite Earths with none of the forethought, none of the planning, none of the great character development, or
none of the tempo.
None of the tempo. None of the.
Well, it's a modern version.
Writing.
It's a modern version.
It's a
modern version in every sense of the word, including the fact that it is shitty.
Yeah, well,
it's like if Michael Bay decided to remake The Godfather. That's what Crisis on Infinite Earths is. All the subtlety and everything that made Crisis on Infinite Earths great and readable 30 years, 40 years after the fact,
But it's not, though.
It's
like, okay, this is a very clear distinction on this board. We all love Crisis on Infinite Earths, but I understand that there are problems with that book, and Toby and Joe hate Infinite Crisis, understanding full well that it has problems, and I love Infinite Crisis. I think this book is fantastic, and there's a lot of reasons for that. The problem with this is it has just as many problems as Crisis on Infinite Earths, but it doesn't have some of the major charm that Crisis on Infinite Earths has. But what it does have instead of charm is action and a fast pace and some really exciting events happening within the DC universe.
And I just feel like all of those exciting events are Superboy Prime, or Superboy Wine, as I've referred to him since, ever since this book, because I read this before reading Crisis on Infinite Earths as an adult. Mm-hmm. And I read it upon getting back into comic books, too. Mm-hmm. And even then, I hated Superboy Prime. Even when I liked the book as a whole, I hated Superboy Prime.
He is the villain of this book.
But it's not just that I hate him as a villain, because I don't see him as villainous. I see him as, he's like the whiny teenager you can't send to his room.
He's petulant.
He's petulant. And he's just not like...
Well, we're talking about a Superboy who was never raised by John and Martha Kent, who is the only superhero in his world.
No, absolutely.
And who has no friends. And has been in literally a glass box for 20 years.
I think that
without
you're
aging.
giving this comic too much credit. And I want to
I don't
clarify
understand what that means.
Okay, I want to clarify, first of all, when I read this the first time, I actually kind of liked it. And it was kind of me getting into DC Comics for the first time. Mm-hmm. Going back and reading it for a second time, I want to go back in time and punch myself for ever having thought that this was a good comic. And I think I can sum up my distaste for it in one single scene, which is when Black Adam pushes Psycho Pirate's face through the back of his skull.
Which is awesome.
And whoever it is that's standing there, his Power Girl maybe, goes, "Isn't that a bit excessive?"
Yeah.
And Black Adam goes, "I don't think so." Or, no, it wasn't. But it was. It was excessive. Everything about this comic is excessive.
Explain to me why a villain who has been manipulated by a character that can control your emotions would not punch their face in. Explain to me why that's excessive. Because Black Adam will level countries if it means protecting his country. He is a fucking villain.
It's not the action of Psycho Pirate has fucked with me, and so I'm going to kill him. It's the way that the scene is presented and the way that it's drawn, where it's basically like he just goes up to Psycho Pirate, puts his fingers in his eyes, and just pushes his face through his skull, and it's just this big shot of his head exploding.
Right.
That actually really reminded me of the death of Seahawk from Youngblood Bloodsport, which is a reference that everybody at the table will get, but you guys won't because we didn't release that episode.
What it actually reminds me of is Kid Invincible punching a hole through the Mahler twins, because it's just as graphic and it's just as violent and it's just as, whoa, that's kind of fucked up. Why did you just do that? The problem is the reason that the Mahler twins scene in Invincible has more weight is because Kid Invincible he's not a villain.
Right.
But the reason that it works in this story is it doesn't have to have weight, is it's like...
Yes, it does.
Why? They wanted to get rid of Psycho Pirate.
But it has no meaning. It was just this hugely gory thing for no purpose, and it's not the only time that it happens in this series, because immediately before that, we have like 5 pages of Superboy Prime punching superheroes in half.
Yeah.
Just fucking executing people left, right, and center, just exploding them for no reason. It adds nothing to the story.
People have to die in fiction to give the story weight.
That's fine.
No,
that's fine.
They don't. That's
yes,
not
they
true.
do. If no one ever
died. It doesn't change the fact that badly written fiction is badly written. This whole fucking book, I actually will give you this. The moment that Psycho Pirate dies, I still am like, because fuck Psycho Pirate.
Yes.
But...
Black Adam is
kind
awesome.
Of like it's like if you put 100 monkeys into a room with typewriters, eventually they'll type something decent, right?
Why can't you give the writer credit for writing something cool?
The whole thing is this.
I am not done yelling at Chart about this because you 100% completely wrong. Yes, the death of a character can add weight to the story.
Yes, it does.
But you cannot turn that around and go, I need to add weight to my story, so I'm just going to kill this person.
Right.
That's not what's happening.
Work. Yes, it is.
No, the world is on the brink of
exactly what
extinction.
Geoff Johns does in every single event he has ever written.
Events,
he just doesn't know.
sure,
He
but
doesn't know how to
he's
do
written
it.
2 events. So he's 2 for 2 on killing people in events.
So wait,
Great.
hold on.
He wrote
Infinite Crisis.
Oh, he wrote 3, and one of which is
52,
amazing.
Which is good because he had little to no control.
Also,
over it.
he wrote Sinestro Corps War, which is absolutely fantastic.
And he wrote Black as Night,
Which is not good.
garbage.
Which is
which is not good.
Like I would.
Did
not
he write
use that
Flashpoint?
as- Yes.
Yeah.
Flashpoint's mediocre to bad. That's fair.
I had
It's-
basically
to be
given
honest
up
with you,
on D&D by that point.
I think that
DC by that point.
Sinestro Corps War is the last good thing that Geoff Johns wrote. In my opinion, that's when he jumps the shark, because everybody goes, "Oh, Geoff Johns, you're so fantastic. Let me slob on your knob all the time." And no one ever reins him in after that.
I think
ever.
knowing what I know now about DC and the direction it was going, you can see the seeds of what Geoff Johns wanted to do in Infinite Crisis, and you can see the New 52 in Infinite Crisis. Because my biggest problem with it is not that there's page after page of like useless. You know what I thought? I thought of the comparison, right? This is like Hostel, right? It's like, it'd be really intense if we had a closed room where a guy cut a girl's eyeball out. That would be really good, right? That's good filmmaking. It's like, no, that's spectacle, right? Spectacle is not necessarily quality writing.
Spectacle in this book is backed up by really great emotional scenes, like Superman losing Lois.
That's fine,
that's
but
great.
the only emotion I feel when reading this book is anger, because it's Geoff Johns saying, my superheroes are better than your superheroes, and because I'm writing them, I can make that effect.
I totally disagree.
Honestly,
That's
by the
fine.
time I
I
got
mean,
to
I
the
knew
death
you
of
would,
Lois
but-
Lane, I had completely stopped giving any shits about anything.
I mean,
that
I
happened in
don't
this comic.
ever, because it's like from the moment he kills the Freedom Force, I'm just like, this is the same shit that Garth Ennis does
Freedom
to superheroes.
Force was editorial mandate. He has to get rid of the Freedom Force.
That's
The way he
fine.
does it, I like.
You can like it.
Why is it not okay for villains to kill heroes?
Because it's not about that. It's about, like, I couldn't, and the thing is like, when we were talking about this with Identity Crisis, we argued about the same thing. And I was, I really couldn't argue that point, because at the end of the day, there was something there, right? Like, I had a problem with it, but that didn't mean that those moments didn't have power. This is the exact opposite of that.
You know what it is?
This is just
it's fridging writ large.
Yeah,
you're
exactly.
cleaning a
those
universe up,
characters.
much like you did in Crisis on Infinite Earths.
But
No,
he
it
didn't.
doesn't clean the universe up, though.
Well, it was
doesn't
the intent.
accomplish anything.
It was
Because
the
this
intent
led into
of the book.
52, which was great.
Well, then
but then
it doesn't-
52
it
led
doesn't
into
accomplish
Countdown,
its
where they
goals.
completely undid everything. This is the beginning of the end of DC Comics.
Yeah, but that's not Geoff Johns' fault.
Not completely. No, it's also Jim Lee's fault and Dan DiDio's fault, and Tom DeFalco's
what
fault.
happens?
I think you mean Bob Harris.
And Bob Harris.
What happens in this
I don't
book?
think Tom DeFalco is Tom DeFalco at DC now.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he is.
Okay.
All those 90s Marvel guys just...
I know that Bob Harris is editor-in-chief.
What happens in this book is they bring back the multiverse, something that is a very cool moment. What happens after this is no one uses the multiverse, which is a tragedy.
Because
That's editorial.
They use the multiverse. They just completely misuse it.
Well, yeah,
They're like, oh yeah, that multiverse thing that existed. Let's blow up a reality. That's cool.
What this book is intending to do is create a more open workspace for writers to write great stories. This was supposed to usher in a new age of Elseworld stories.
And it was really awesome when that happened in 52.
And it never happens anywhere else.
But
and that's
like, the thing is that
a massive problem.
Geoff Johns was one of the people making those decisions.
He was not an editor at that point.
When does he become an editor?
Not until the New 52.
It's around the time of New 52 that he becomes chief creative officer.
Yeah,
Right.
but
He has no time. He's just a writer up until then.
Yeah. Well, that's not to say that his voice doesn't have weight.
yeah,
I'm sure that's true.
It's
But
clear
you,
that
you
they're
cannot
grooming
absolve
him.
him of any fault for a comic that he wrote.
Well, I don't have a problem with this comic, so I don't have to absolve him.
But you have a long-
guys hate this comic, so anything he does in this comic, you automatically already hate.
No, but
by the time issue 2
No,
happens,
I hate this
you've
comic
stopped
because I
listening.
hate everything that he does in this comic.
You
Like, I
stopped
don't hate it just
listening
for the
after
sake of
issue
hating
2.
it.
No, and that's not the thing. It's very easy to like write off our opinion because you don't agree with it, but
That's exactly what you're doing.
No, we don't put the cart before the fucking horse, all right?
Yes, you do.
The bottom line is that this is an awful work because of what he does in it, not because we go into it hating it.
I would love to hear some of your reasons for why you hate it.
I just told you.
Geoff Johns does. Geoff Johns.
Superboy Prime standing in front of the Kent house going, I'm the one that should be here.
Yeah, because he didn't fucking get a family.
Kent. I don't fucking care. Make him relatable then. Make him fucking somebody that I care about.
He's not supposed to be relatable. He's the villain.
No,
and
he's awful because I don't care about him at all.
You're not supposed to. He is a wrecking ball.
Bullshit.
Okay.
All right?
He's
literally there to
gore
punch
porn is what it is. It's
the
fucking
most interesting villains are ones that you can empathize with. And a wrecking ball, while it's destructive, and I'd like for it not to smash my house apart, I don't care about
I'd like
it.
you
It does
to
not
name,
make me feel emotions.
I would like you to name the 3 best villains in this story.
Superman from Earth 2.
Okay.
Probably Black Adam, although a lot of that is predicated on knowing what his backstory is.
And what comes next.
And based a lot on what happens to him in 52.
Fair.
And fuck, I don't know.
Okay,
all of the villains are just completely flat and uninteresting.
I like Alexander Luthor. I think he's a great villain because he is so wrong, but 100% believes in what he does that you find it fascinating, like how he's just looking for the perfect Earth. And anything that comes in between, because his world was destroyed, he now has no sympathy for any other world. I think that's interesting. I think that the Joker is the best villain in this entire story.
He's barely in it.
And he's
But he's got the
fantastic.
best part. And the reason I like that is because I totally fucking called that shit, is because I knew, I was like, you can't not let the Joker play. Yeah, the Joker has to play. Like, that's the thing.
That moment is fantastic when Luthor and Joker team up, and they're like, no.
Reading it this time, I went into it with my last memories of it being I liked it.
Yeah.
I mean, I hated Superboy Prime, but I liked it. So you can't say that I went into it expecting to hate it, because I didn't.
I didn't say that. I said that once you started hating it, you stopped listening.
No, and that's not true, because
because you did earlier on the show say that once Superman is losing Lois, you've already stopped caring.
Well, absolutely, yeah. But I mean, the thing is that
there's
I
a
don't
difference
need
between
to
not
see,
caring and not listening.
Yeah,
I don't.
Exactly.
I would have loved for him to bring it back around.
See people
like
fucking. I don't need to see people like I don't need to see people burning to death from an oil tanker explosion to know that it was a bad fucking, like, I'm not going to watch that, right? I'm not going to fucking watch a train wreck so I can see dead bodies flying out of it.
That's not what's happening.
No,
in the story.
This is a fucking train wreck, dude.
Why?
Because Johns, you know why? Because
start every sentence about why you don't like it with "because Johns."
Okay,
I would like you to stop doing that, please.
Well, I'll just blame somebody that didn't fucking
tell
write it.
me what's wrong with the actual story.
Okay,
because there's moments.
Yes, I would love to hear.
Because every moment in here that should have weight is a moment that isn't worked for.
Okay, I would love to hear Toby's problems with the story.
Okay, here's one example of something that's wrong with the story. So all the Flashes team up to push Superboy Prime into the Speed Force.
Yes.
And then the next issue, he's back.
Yeah.
And they don't explain what happened. And he's got, like, new armor.
They trapped him in a red sun for 20 years.
Yeah, but when did they explain
for a long
that?
time. He literally comes back and he goes, I broke out of a sun that they kept me in for years, and now I've made a suit out of the Anti-Monitor's armor.
Yeah, but they don't... Like, you never see any of that on the page.
Don't.
Like, it's not...
That
like
happens
saying,
in another book.
Worked for. It's in another book that I don't even think came out until after this event was finished.
Yeah, probably. I mean,
I don't think they actually even started going into that until the new Flash series with Bart Allen.
No, it happens in a tie-in book. Somebody will know where that happens, but it doesn't happen in the Bart Allen story.
My problem with it is that it jumps from like over the top moment to over the top moment without ever taking the time to establish why those events are important or what's at stake or what people's real emotions are. Like what is your goal? I mean, if Alexander Luthor's goal was to create a better universe, there are so many better ways that he could have gone about it.
Well, he's trying to find the perfect Earth, and at first he thinks it's Earth 2, so he brings Earth 2 back, and then he realizes that it is not perfect.
No, he says pretty early on that it's not Earth. Earth 2 is just a stop.
Like,
right.
Well,
he says specifically.
Like, it's possible to read into the story and kind of pull all of his emotion and all of his pathos out of it. But that is something that you are creating whole cloth in your head. It is not on the page.
Well, on
anywhere.
the page, he is looking for the perfect universe. Like, that's what he does.
Yeah,
And
but he just comes across as like power hungry.
He is
and,
power hungry.
and evil. Like
he
there's no
is that.
I mean, I
Yeah, but he was a hero at the end of
was.
the last story.
And then
At the
his
end of
world
Crisis on
was
Infinite
destroyed.
Earths. No, his world was destroyed at the beginning of Crisis
yeah,
on
exactly.
Infinite
It's
Earths.
the first
a world that he
thing we
never
see.
knew.
Yeah.
Like, I'm willing to concede that shitty things happen to him.
Right.
But if you're going to take a character who was a hero
Yeah.
in one story, and in the very next story, because this is a direct sequel to Crisis on Infinite Earths, in the next story, he is a black villain.
Yeah.
Like, he is an evil person.
like-
You need to explain why he's that
Well,
way.
I think that
you
what's-
need to justify what his emotions are and why he's going about things in the way that he is, rather than just, he's so awesome and he has all these powers and he's so evil and he's just going to fuck everything
And
up
that's-
because
Well,
he's
that-
such a bastard.
The only
Because
reason
Geoff
that the
Johns is
stories
not
give-
able to write complex characters.
The only reason that the story that is given for why he is now villainous is he spent the last 20 years watching this Earth 1. And what he has seen is nothing but heroes fail.
but that's
And he saved this world. And it let him down.
I
Yeah,
don't.
but
So he
never-
doesn't care about it
This is
He
anymore.
never tried to fix it.
the thing
Well,
is,
You never
He
have
does.
you never have that breakdown moment where
No.
like he's tried everything and it's none of it's worked.
Well, he
and he's at the end
calculated
of his rope, and he's like,
79,000 possible
but that's
solutions to
it's
this,
words
and
on a
this is the
page.
only.
It doesn't give you any kind of.
They're all
Yeah.
words on a page. I mean, like, I think that what you see him say, like, I've gone through every possible solution, and this is the only one that makes sense to me. I think that's a great moment for someone who is an idiot to have.
I think it's a lot of telling and not a lot of showing.
Well, they're showing
I'm
you
being
other
told
things.
these are what these are the reasons why these people are doing these things. These are the
It's-
emotions that
yeah.
they're feeling. These are their motivations. But I'm not seeing it.
and that's
I'm
the
not
thing. Like
feeling it.
he is showing you other things that are I don't feel are as important as the things
Yeah.
he should be showing us. Like,
But this is an event book
It's-
that is
it's that-
6 issues, not
well, that's true.
7
And
issues.
maybe
that
if
is
you-
not 12 issues of super compressed old school comics.
Well,
like, this series needed to be much longer. And that's why you need to read 10 books to make this book make
much
sense.
longer,
Yeah.
and it still feels like a train wreck.
I disagree.
Okay,
I
I'm
mean,
gonna go ahead and say what I think.
Go
Yeah.
for it, Cade.
Because the longer I wait, the more some of my opinions are being colored by listening to you guys. Okay, so I wanted to start off with a disclaimer. I had some medication problems in the last couple of weeks, and so my brain hasn't been how it usually is. And I remember reading this when it first came out. I didn't realize that I had read this before until I actually read it, and I was like, oh, I've read this before. And I remember it being pretty good. I mean, I love superheroes. I love being entertained. I love, just... I mean, I actually did like Black Adam
yeah.
pushing
Because it's awesome.
his face through his skull. That was okay. However, I hated this book. I
just want to go on record. This is the first time Kate has ever hated anything, not just on the fucking show. All right.
no, that's not true because I didn't like Black Sad.
No, you didn't. You said you didn't like the middle story. Of
Okay,
it.
no,
You
that's
had
true.
problems
You
with
said
it.
you had problems.
Yeah.
You
have
still said there was a
never-
lot that you liked about it.
Yeah.
Okay, that's true. No, because that first comic of Black Sad I loved.
Yeah.
I thought it was very well written. But no, this one, like, okay, so I didn't read all the lead ups this time going into it. I read a couple of them just because OMAC Project is still one of my favorite
It's great.
books. It is it's an amazing Batman story written by none other than Greg Rucka. I mean,
Yeah.
and I've recommended it on the podcast before. I love it.
I think the ending of it in this book is satisfying, too. Like, the ending of that OMAC story where Batman gathers a team up and goes to fight Brother Eye in space.
That's probably one of the better stories.
Yeah, it's
It
okay.
has Mr. Terrific in it. Mr. Terrific's fucking
And
awesome.
Black Lightning and the new Blue Beetle, who's created in this story.
And Booster Gold.
And Booster Gold, who comes back from the future to fix things.
I did like that scene, and I thought that it was done better than most of the stuff in this book.
Yeah.
But one of the problems I had with this is I did not feel that Geoff Johns was writing it as well as he could have. And keep this in mind. I have defended Geoff Johns on this show a number of times.
Yeah, it's true.
Because I loved his Teen Titans stuff.
Me too.
And
this is a great conclusion to that Teen Titans story as well.
It was... Yeah, okay, yes. It was
because that scene where where they all fight Superboy Prime, that happens in Teen Titans also. Like, that's the biggest problem with this book, is that it's not all contained in the book.
Yes, no, and that is one of the biggest problems I have with it. But I guess mainly what it is for me is I feel that this was an enormous undertaking, and I don't believe that Geoff Johns did it as well as he could have.
Yeah.
There were some moments that I did enjoy, because I'm generally easy to please, especially when it comes to superheroes and the big fight scenes and feeling things. I felt that a lot of these scenes, though, were trying to evoke an emotion from me that I just couldn't get to come out. And like
the bombing of Bloodhaven didn't do anything for you.
Yeah, I felt nothing.
Yeah. I mean,
I felt like they were trying to reference something that happened in Crisis on Infinite Earths, like they do constantly throughout this book.
No, they were
But every time that it happens, it's like, remember when you saw that thing that made you feel that emotion?
This was the first step in killing Nightwing, was bombing Bloodhaven, because they were going to kill Nightwing in this book.
I know.
And they went back.
That they didn't.
They went back on it, and I'm glad he survived because of what would happen after, like him going on.
Because I think one of the reasons they didn't is because there was around this time there was a collectible card game called Versus, which was kind of like Magic with superheroes, and Upper Deck had it, and they did a pre-release event for an Infinite Crisis card set, and they released unauthorized art, and one of the cards they released was the Death of Nightwing, and so not only did they lose their DC license, but DC scrapped the whole Kill Nightwing idea.
Right. And, I mean, I'm glad that they didn't kill Nightwing, because he would go on to become Batman, which is great. But it isn't a reference to Crisis on Infinite Earths. It's in the Nightwing book. The destruction of Bloodhaven is like, again...
I swear there was something with Chemo, or whatever the hell his name is, in Crisis on Infinite Earths.
I don't think he was even around in Crisis on Earths. I think he's a much more modern character. I guess I just
got confused about that part.
Yeah, the thing about this book, like, sorry to cut Kate off, and we'll go back to you as soon as I say this, but this is absolutely everything that is wrong with modern comics, as opposed to everything that was going right at the beginning of the modern age of comics, which was, you have this Silver Age ideal of things that happen in the book. Yes, it's a shared universe, but we don't have crossovers, because everything that we have is predicated on the fact that we have long, ongoing series.
Yeah.
So we don't have miniseries, and we don't have crossover books.
Right.
If they cross over, it's like a very different style of crossover.
Right.
And so when Crisis on Infinite Earths happens, it is 12 issues contained, the end, done. And then when Superman was coming out?
There were some kinds of crossovers, especially like in that Animal Man run we covered,
which was after,
but that's later. That's after Crisis.
Oh no, that is true.
And the Silver Age, there wasn't like Batman would show up in Superman's book for like an issue, and they would be doing something weird, or like,
and sometimes it would be like, for the conclusion of the story, go check out Action Comics number 584.
The Brave and the Bold, which was all crossover,
or World's Finest, which was all Batman and Superman. Right. But it wasn't like now where their crossovers are huge events and stuff. It would just be like, Batman goes to Metropolis to chase this criminal, and he runs into Superman. They're like, hey, chum, hey, buddy, and then that's it, you know.
As opposed to this book now, which literally is like 30 books, because of all the tie-ins that are happening. When Crisis on Infinite Earths happens, in Batman 407 or whatever, the one that came out before Crisis started, Batman is just doing Batman stuff. And in 408, the one that came out in between issues 1 and 2, Batman's still just doing Batman stuff. It's not Batman as he is functioning through
And that was
Crisis.
written by Judd Winnick.
Yeah.
No, this is way
No,
more.
that was before Crisis on Infinite Earths.
This is...
I'm talking about Crisis on Infinite Earths.
Back in the 80s.
So in the 80s, Batman, the Batman books that were coming out during Crisis on Infinite Earths were not related to Crisis on Infinite Earths. They were their own separate story. But Kate's right, the Judd Winnick Batman that's coming out during this, the Under the Hood, that series is largely ruined by the fact that it ties in with Crisis on Infinite Earths.
Soothing nerd hatred.
You see the difference, like the difference between these books. Like, I am the first one to admit that the modern comics don't work properly. And this book is a fine example of why it doesn't work properly. If you're willing to overlook the fact that you have to read 20 other books to get the weight of this book, which I understand is a huge undertaking and not fun for a lot of people. I did read all 10 of the crossovers or the lead-ins that I was talking about at the beginning of the story, and I think that's why I'm able to enjoy it as much as I am, is because you cannot read this book by itself. That is the biggest fault of this book.
It really is both the pride and prejudice of this kind of storytelling.
Right.
Like, here, if you want to read 60 fucking issues
Right.
that cross over into 10 different books, plus 4 different miniseries, plus the main series, like, you can tell a hugely expansive story, but so frequently it seems like it falls on its ass. And the one that I point to, in contrast to this one, because it came out only a year later, was Civil War over on the Marvel side.
Yeah.
Where you had the main book where one thing was happening, and then you had literally every other book written by other authors where something sort of similar was happening, but not exactly the same, and it was incredibly confusing.
The
and
worst.
Stuff was like hugely disjointed,
I hate
and
that.
it just never really came together in a way that was satisfying. And it seems like that always happens.
And
Marvel just did an event, Infinity,
right,
and like a month or 2 months after Infinity was over, they're still putting out Infinity tie-in books that are happening back during that event.
Yeah, Superior Spider-Man Infinity just came out. Like
there was
Wednesday
I think
of this week.
Infinity the Heist?
Oh yeah, it's still coming out.
That like just came out.
Yeah. I agree with you that is awful and I hate that. But the next event book that Geoff Johns would go on to write, Sinestro Corps War, is largely fantastic because nothing else ties into it.
Right.
Like, I think that the major fault of this book is that it is written in an environment in which Editorial wants to milk it for everything it's
I think that is
worth.
a fault. It is not the fault.
I think that is a major fault.
I think it's a huge fault, and I do think
absolutely the biggest fault.
It's not just that Editorial wanted to milk it for everything it's worth. It's also that DC Editorial even then did not know what the fuck they were doing.
No, they totally didn't.
It's like we've mentioned this before. Like right as 52 was coming out, all the guys that were writing 52 came to our local comic book shop. Mark Waid, Geoff Johns, Greg Rucka, and
no, it was just those three.
It was just those three.
Grant Morrison didn't.
Grant Morrison didn't show up because I don't think he really exists on this plane of reality. But
maybe not.
And like Mark Waid at one point actually said, like, I can't. I mean, he was very agitated by certain things that were brought up that he could not speak about because he was on contract for DC.
Yeah.
And Greg Rucka was mentioned later that a lot of the stuff that he wanted to do with Batwoman was very heavily editorially controlled, and he was not able to do it.
Right.
And that he had wanted to do it originally with, it was not Batwoman. He wanted to make the Question more prominent and Renee Montoya's story much more prominent. And the Editorial was constantly telling you need to push Batwoman. You need to push Batwoman.
Right.
We want we're going to launch a new title, blah, 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 blah. And so, I mean...
Which they didn't do for 2 years after 52 came out.
Yeah, and I think that the thing is that this is kind of my problem, is that it's not just that I feel that... I mean, I just feel that there are... I agree with Toby said. The moment, it's like the wavelengths of moments in this book are so close together that you just kind of skip over the top the top of them, and you don't ever get to like experience any of the troughs and beneath. So it's like,
no, I think that to experience those troughs, you have to do a lot of work,
and that's fine. But I personally am the kind of person that's like, I'm going to if you give me a story that I believe that makes me want to experience that, then I will. If you don't, like, I get into this argument with people all the time about, like, Harry Potter and the end, the way that Harry Potter ended. And they're like, no, this, and this. And I'm like, not really. I mean, maybe that story hit you. And, it's like I said before, we talk about opinions, right? We talk about in a medium that's fluid, and it's going to strike people in different ways. But at the end of the day, it's not just the real, like, crappily written comic book stories I can deal with. They really don't usually cause me any kind. I'm like, that was stupid or whatever. The thing I hate the most about this book is that it represents, you can see the threads that Johns would later get into with, like, it's like Rebirth. When you read Rebirth on its own, it's a great story. And it shows that he can be subtle, and he shows that he can develop a character. Because he's got some great shit in there, man. If you
he turns a villain into a hero.
Yeah.
You make him like Hal again.
But then when you see what he was planning with that, it's like really hard for me to read Rebirth now because I see where it was going.
Sure.
And like reading this, you can see where he's going, and you can see where DC Editorial is going. And where it's going is to the fucking, like, I found it so hilarious that all Luthor, Alexander Luthor and Superboy are talking about is how dark Earth 1 has become.
Yeah.
And then think about the way the New 52 is now. And how it's a fucking awful, awful place filled with fucking awful, awful characters. And
I agree.
like,
but I think that's a great critique of... I thought that it was a really interesting critique of modern comics. Of just like...
It was
these,
at the time.
And these characters are... They hate the universe because of how dark it's become and how many mistakes the heroes have made, which leads me back to the reason that I think Identity Crisis is all about heroes making mistakes, is because what the people from that pocket universe, Superboy Prime, Earth 2 Superboy, Lois, and Alexander Luthor, like, all they're seeing is, well, that's not how I would have done it. That's not how we would have done it. We were better heroes. We were better. And then when the test is put to them, how great of a hero can you be? They're fucking terrible. Like, they're even worse. And that's what I think
agree with that.
I think that's a cool story. Yes, it could have been written better. I agree.
Could have been
but
written
I think
a lot better.
A lot of story. I think that almost every story could be written better. Like, I think that there's always room for improvement in stories. The art is never at its maximum. It's just when it's finished, it comes out. And that's unfortunate. I do want to get back to Cade, though, because I know he has more to talk about. Yes. I want to mention one thing, though. The saddest moments in this book for me have to do with Robin. And they literally, if you're just reading it, just this book, you don't see any of that.
Yeah,
but Robin has the worst fucking time. Like, Infinite Crisis should be retitled Robin's super horrible, really bad, shitty day. Because Identity Crisis, they kill his dad. And what do they do in Infinite Crisis? They kill his fucking best friend. He is literally on the ground. He runs into the fight after they fight Superboy Prime. And he runs into the fight and he's like... And he's just bawling. He's just laying on Connor's corpse and fucking crying. And
that's kind of interesting to me that Robin is the one who is cradling Superboy's corpse. And not Superboy's girlfriend.
She's there first.
I mean, she's also there.
But
Robin is the one who has the meltdown.
He lost his best friend. He had no friends before this. Like, Robin was isolated from the world a lot because he was picked on as a kid, and that's what led him to become a detective and find out who Bruce Wayne was. And the end of that Robin story, what he gets for all of that hard work is losing his dad, his best friend, and almost his big brother in this story. If they had killed Nightwing in this story, Robin's fucked. Like, I feel so bad for him at the end of this story. Like, I'm crying on the inside because of how shitty a day Robin had. And that is so glossed over in this book because it's just literally happening in the background of panels.
It's okay because it literally no longer happened.
I know. It didn't happen. And yay, I'm...
The bright side of the New 52.
It happened to me. And what I think...
It happened to me too because I had to read
this book better than anything that's been said. Have you read Infinite Crisis yet? Yeah, it happened to me.
It happened to me. I survived Infinite Crisis. But I think that that's what I mean when I say this book takes fucking work to make it a good book. And I'm not gonna sit here and say that it is expertly written, because it's not. And I'm not going to sit here and say that it is the best thing that DC's ever put out, because it's fucking not even close. But what I love about this book is there are moments in here that make me love reading superhero comics. And whether it's set up for what comes next, like the Blue Beetle, and going, I really like the new Blue Beetle.
God,
I think that he's
I
really
did too.
cool.
It's a shame they fucked him up for the new 52.
And that's fine.
Here's the thing,
but this book set up that whole series, and I like that.
Oh.
And it's the same kind of thing that what happened in Crisis on Infinite Earths when they're creating like the new Wildcat and the new Flash. You know, like you're moving the legacy forward. I love that.
Here's the thing, though. Okay, one, if I have to read a 30-page explanation of why something was good in order to appreciate it, it wasn't that good to me.
But it's not a 30-page explanation.
It's like if somebody
though.
has to spend 5 minutes explaining to me why a joke is funny.
But they're not doing that.
And second of all, this comic does not get credit because comics that came after it were good.
No, I agree with you. I think I'm not saying this book is better because of it. I'm saying there are moments I enjoy because of that. And secondly, this isn't like someone writing the 30-page paper to explain to you why it's good. This is like walking into the punchline of a joke where you did not hear the 4-hour setup to that joke.
No, I think he's saying that your diatribe is the 30-page paper.
That's fine, but I'm saying that you missed the whole fucking setup of this story, and that's sad. Like, not for you, but for anyone that reads this book. Like, that's sad, because this book isn't that great by itself. Like, on its own, this book has massive failings. The first time I read this book, I absolutely fucking hated it. This was the book that made me say, I'll never read DC Comics ever again.
But, I mean, you couldn't have stuck to that very long because you read 52.
No, I didn't read it then. It took me years to go back and read 52.
It's really fascinating to me that both Joe and I liked this originally and now hate it.
Well, I did
hated
too.
It and like it.
That's because you guys are pudding heads. But I went back and read, because I had not read a lot of DC. Joe and I are working on new insults to call each other. And I liked that one. Pudding heads. Your heads are full of pudding. I wish. I would eat that. It would be delicious.
That is poltroon. I think the word that comes to mind.
You gigantic boob. We've been working on these all week, and they're not that good. So what I think is why I hated it the first time is there's so much fucking shit going on in this book. Like the Spectre kills the wizard Shazam off panel, and there's so much happening off panel that when I read this the first time I was like, what the fuck is going on? I don't know who any of these villains are. I have not read enough DC to be reading this book. And now, when I read it, I know that I'll hate it unless I read, 5 years of DC comics leading up to it.
I feel like Geoff Johns is writing this comic literally for himself and no one else. And that is, I think, true of everything that has come after this. Leading into and including New 52 is being written for all of the Geoff Johns of the world and no one else.
Geoff Johns is writing DC fan fiction. They just happen to be publishing it for him.
Yeah.
But that's as are all writers of comic books.
Let Cade finish, because I have a point I want to bring up.
Cade, I'm sorry to have cut you off. I didn't think it would take that long.
Okay, no, it's okay. So, though, it actually helps me because I realized something else I wanted to say. When you pointed out that the ending to Geoff Johns' Teen Titans happens in this book, and I was thinking about it, and okay, so it is kind of a decent ending, but I feel that with all the drama that was going on in this book, I feel that it was a story that should have been told in the Teen Titans book.
It was also.
Okay, I don't remember both, that. But
and that's, again, a major fault of this book. But
and so, see, I don't know if I feel that all these storylines work when all of this shit is going on in this overly drama-filled book.
Yeah.
I don't care about half of the stuff that's going on, and it ruins some of the stuff that I do care about. And it pulls me out to the point where the emotion for half of the scenes is not felt.
Well, because they go by. They're, gone.
No, and that's true. And I guess that's one of my main problems, is there's a lot of shit in this book that I should care about, and that in some ways I do care about. Yeah. But I don't feel that it was done well in this book.
You don't have enough time.
And that's the thing, is that there's no time. The scene with Power Girl, when she remembers Earth 2.
Everything, yeah. It's like
that is the
top of
one
page.
scene, I think, that really emotionally moved me. And what did they do with it? Nothing.
Yeah,
Nothing
no, I
else
agree.
ever comes up.
That actually
And
brings me back
I
to
would
something
have
that I
loved
got
this
pissed off
series
about.
If they had built off of that and had her go to Jay Garrick and Wildcat and all of these other Earth 2 characters who have had much of their life wiped away and gone, you used to have this other existence. You used to have a family.
Do you know where that happens?
Where does that happen?
In other books.
Of course it does.
Then that's, again... I
so
don't want to
why am I even reading this book? Why does this book exist?
Literally because you're reading everything at DC and you're a DC fan. Like, this is that big, like, summer blockbuster for DC fans. Like, if you're reading everything that's coming out and you're very immersed in the modern age of DC, you read all the lead-ins, and the ads have been coming out in the back of all of the books that you're subscribed to for 6 months, and you're going, shit, I wonder what's going to happen in Infinite Crisis. I wonder what's going to happen. And all these storylines that you really like are tied up, and all these characters that you really like, cool things happen to. And in the next month, after these books are done, you get brand new characters, like the brand new Blue Beetle, and you get Flash as Bart Allen. Like, cool things happen in this book. That's who this book is for.
You know what I call that?
Unfortunately, there aren't a lot of those people.
You know what I call that? Poor storytelling.
Well,
I mean,
is it poor storytelling, or is it just like, this is a fan letter to my fans?
Because you can have, there's a difference between, and I will give this to Blackest Night. The core story of Blackest Night pretty much tells you what's going on in that storyline. It's awful. I mean, it's aside from a few moments, and it's awful.
It's much
and
worse than this
book. But it's in the. I mean, I will say it is much worse than this, but it's awful in the same way that this is, which is that it's a series of moments connected by events that are only kind of tenuously connected, and everybody that Johns likes has "I'm awesome" syndrome. I win by it's like. Psycho Pirate, I can influence anybody, even the Spectre, who's supposed to be like fucking God's henchman, right?
Well, he has no host, so he is underpowered,
which makes it
crazy.
See, and that does the opposite to me. I think. Well,
that happens in Day of Vengeance for people that.
Yeah, no, it totally happens in Day of Vengeance, right? That's like kind of like, well, he doesn't have a host, so how like he's a spirit of fucking vengeance. How is he like not? How is he susceptible to mind control?
Well, it makes him. In a way, it does make him stronger because he's not hindered by the power, but in another way, it makes him uncontrollable. It makes him, like, more crazy. That's how they explain that in Day of Vengeance. It's because he fights. Because he fights Shazam.
Yeah, because the whole thing is that in Day of Vengeance, it's like he's become unhinged because Hal has come back and he doesn't have a host anymore.
Wait, actually,
then Luthor says Psycho Pirate's been controlling him and making him crazy.
No, actually, sorry. Isn't this the scene where Superboy's like, oh, and you had Psycho Pirate influencing Wonder Woman and Superman and Batman, and that's why they're making bad decisions? And then Luthor says no.
They were making
those on their own.
Anyways.
Is that when he lumps in?
No, the Spectre is separately. He specifically says that he's been having the Psycho Pirate, and then there's the whole. And I'm sorry, like I will admit that this is just me. The whole we've been living in a pocket universe, watching you for all these years. Fucking retarded, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, that happens in Crisis on Infinite Earths.
Yeah, I know, but like the way
into the pocket dimension.
Yeah, I mean, like,
but then they just vanish.
Yeah, I mean, like the whole
they
like
don't die.
The whole like we've been watching you and planning our return.
And like that is one thing that I appreciated about the series was the way that it kind of brought out all of these elements of the Crisis on Infinite Earths that got forgotten.
Yeah,
like the Golden Age Wonder Woman was just still around, hanging out on Mount Olympus. Like all those things that got forgotten off in the corner, like.
Which is awesome.
It's like all those things are still there. Like that was cool.
Yeah.
And I wish the rest of the series had been cool in that way.
Yeah. I mean, it's like
it's a story that I wanted to like, and I couldn't.
And that's the funny thing.
It definitely could have been better.
It's weird because the reasons you say you like it are exactly like that's what I want in a comic book story. I want those cool comic book moments, and I just don't feel they ever happen for me in this.
Well, they don't. I think there's stuff in here that I really like, but those are all things that happen because of my like for that character from other books. My love of Robin and Nightwing are very much affect how I feel about this book. My love of the new Blue Beetle. And Booster Gold,
which was cool,
very much affect my liking.
I would love it if they told the Robin story that you described. in a clear and concise way.
Instead of over like 10 years of DC history.
Yeah, instead of having
it
it be this kind of like vague thing that you have to kind of like sniff out.
Well,
like if they actually told that story, that would be a great story, but they don't.
Well, not in this book. I mean, and not in any one book. And that's the problem that I have with modern comics is it's not invincible.
Yeah,
basically,
I mean that's the problem with all
modern
comics
superhero books.
Not invincible.
They're not invincible, and by that I mean like they're not well written, and they're also not planned out, and they're influenced by too many things coming from the outside. Like Invincible gets to tell its like you don't get the story of Rexplosion in very many other places except in the Invincible universe, and when stuff.
I think it's just Rexplode.
Rexplode?
It is Rexplode, and that's the thing. Is like when you compare the moments in this to like analogous moments in Invincible.
Oh yeah,
like there were moments when I was fucking gripping the pages in Invincible. So I'm like, I would hold my breath because those moments are so intense.
Well, and
I read this and I just. And you know
that's because you read all of Invincible and you know all those characters.
Yeah,
but had you skipped 20 issues in Invincible, the next issue you read would not have been very good.
I read all the lead up to this though, because this is when I would go to Gabby. I wasn't working,
but you liked it then.
I went to. I did. Well, I always hated Superboy Prime. I always thought he was an awful character.
That's fair. He's literally a one-dimensional character.
Yeah.
He is a wrecking ball. Period. End of story. He's mad that he didn't get a good life. So.
But I mean, like the
answer
thing
to
that
is
annoys me the most
everything.
about that is then it's I didn't realize what function Superboy Prime had in the DC multiverse until years later when he's like a joke character.
Yeah, yep.
He's the angry fan, and for
really
Geoff
is.
Johns to kind of take that and it's like and kind of turn him into this whole like. I just don't.
Well,
that's the thing. It's like at the end of the day,
kind of the angry fan of this universe because it's kind of what we talked about on the previous episode about what we wish Wally West would do to the new 52, which is just come in and
but that would be good.
Everything. And that's fair. You can like whatever you like, Joe. Those are your opinions and they exist in your head.
It's not the fact that Superboy Prime comes in and says like all of these things are wrong. It's that he is presented as this whiny, petulant, just piece of shit. I mean, this book really does kind of denigrate the fans of DC Comics.
And that's the thing. It's like
the character
if
of Superboy
Prime fucking showed up places
not,
with his
though,
arms fucking with his arms crossed and said, "This is wrong, and I'm going to make it right," and was this kind of implacable like force.
But he's
just
not
saying
that
like,
character.
"Fuck that." Well, I mean, that's the thing, and that's why
you're creating a character that doesn't exist within this book,
right?
And
that's
fair.
No, I think Luthor is that character.
I think it's wrong-headed to
work.
create a new character to specifically tell off your existing characters. Like that's a very fan fiction move to do. I mean, really, if you're going to do something like that, you need to take a character like Wally West, who has legitimately been fucked over by current continuity, and have them come in as your mouthpiece.
Well, I think the argument could be made that Superboy was fucked over by the fact that he no longer has a universe or a home or a family and never got the life that Connor can't got, and he has to watch Connor, like, basically have everything that he doesn't have. And Superman, have everything that he doesn't have.
And the thing is that he was not ever presented as a conflicted character. He is a villain. He's a one-dimensional villain.
Well,
he's just like
here's this guy who shows up and starts accidentally killing people and going, "You made me do this."
Yeah. Well, he's very clearly been manipulated by Luthor for a long time.
I read this and I feel
like
I think to myself that Superboy Prime is there only because if he wasn't there, everybody would be like, "How are you going to stop Superman?"
Yeah, exactly.
So you need a character there, and that's the only. It's like,
well, I mean,
feel
Superboy
like,
Prime is there because he was there in Crisis on Infinite Earths.
Well, yeah, but I mean,
and also he does
his
exist,
whole attitude.
He does exist in that space of. You create a DC villain, one of the things they have to be able to do if they're going to try to take over the world is punch really hard. Because
punch time.
Because Superman is a problem. There's a reason he doesn't work in the Marvel universe, and there's a reason that kind of character doesn't really work in a lot of other universes. Like, even in Invincible, he is not the strongest on the Earth. And in the universe, he's not even close. And that's why he works in that book.
Well, that's a different conversation.
I think that's fair, and I would love to have an Invincible show and we're going to need to have one soon because we talk about it all the time.
About it
No, it's going to be a long run. I promise you it will be a long run.
We talked about it on our favorite thing, favorite runs episode, but that was very superficial. We need to...
It will be a long run. I promise you. Yeah. I'll eat my hair if it's
fucking
not.
Best superhero comic coming out right now.
I agree. And I think that Superman is a problem in the DC universe and a problem that you have to deal with. And so you either have to be able to punch him really hard, which is the character that they had. Superboy Prime can punch hard. Or you have a character like Luthor who knows how to work around the fact that Superman can punch hard. But they didn't get that. They
have a Luthor.
Yeah, but he is kind of working around... He's working around Superman by throwing Superboy at him.
I mean, he runs circles around all of the villains and basically
except
everyone in the DC universe for months.
Except for Luthor and the Joker, who... know what's going on.
Well, the Joker, because you can't...
Lex Luthor only really figures it out at the end.
No, he's the one that set up the Villains United team. He's Mockingbird in that series. Spoilers.
I thought that Alexander Luthor set up the Villains United.
Okay, so Alexander Luthor sets up the Society of Supervillains. He's pretending to be that Luthor. Right. And he gets everyone together. And there are 6... supervillains that say no. Yeah. We won't join that team, including Catman, Parademon, not Ragdoll yet. I forget what her name. There's a girl in there whose name I can't remember.
Hold on.
I have
the Fiddler.
The Fiddler who gets replaced by Catman in the first issue. They shoot the Fiddler in the head, and they're like, "We need a new guy," and they go get Catman. Anyway, those 6 guys say no to Luthor. And this mysterious entity called Mockingbird takes those 6 guys and pits them against the Society of Supervillains and says, we're going to take that down. Mockingbird is the actual Lex Luthor. Okay. Because he's been manipulated by Alexander Luthor, and Alexander Luthor is posing as Lex Luthor to set up all of the other villains.
See, now...
That all happens in Villains United.
That's an incredibly confusing explanation, right? Imagine... Yeah. You didn't know any of that.
Oh, no. That's why I think this book sucked the first time I read it, because I didn't know any of that, and it was hogwash the first time I read it. It was just, let's throw a lot of garbage onto a page and call it a comic book. Once you do the work and the research and you go, I understand why all the pieces are moving the way they're moving, that now I can enjoy it for what it is. It's not complicated because all the complicated things happen off screen. They happen in different books with better writers who handle those things better. And Geoff Johns is allowed to go, let me take my 2 biggest toys and hit them together real hard like I did when I was 4. And you go, that's cool. That's cool. And that's why I like this book.
I mean, you say that's cool. I say...
That was cool. When you were 4, that was the best thing you could possibly do.
When I was 4, I probably would have read this as not...
When I was 4 years old, my toys had a actually fairly complex ongoing story.
Did you straighten a Slinky? Are you Egon?
No.
We had one toy. It was a Slinky.
There was an ongoing plot line with the G.I. Joe that had a swapped head.
Well, you're a writer, Toby. I mean, that's the kind of thing you do when you're a kid that likes to write. You create stories. I think that's great. All kids should create their own stories, and I hate that all toys now are just like, it's just a thing that you saw on TV, and now play exactly the way that it was on TV, except for Legos.
And I'm being very honest here. There is something that my father once said to me. He probably said it to me multiple times, but he said it at least once that stuck with me my entire life, which is being able to hit somebody the hardest never made anyone right.
That's true.
I think that it is, and to an extent, spoiled my ability to read a large swath of superhero comics that are predicated on Biff Powell.
Might is right. I think the might is right mentality is like...
The superhero comics that interest me are the ones with the complex emotional nuances where they're talking about what it means to be a hero.
I agree.
The responsibility when you take the entire world onto your shoulders.
Well, that's why...
A good example of this would be Green Arrow, who has never had powers and yet plays with the big boys.
Right. And I think that's why people often preferred Marvel over DC, because a lot of the DC characters were, I do what's right. Why? Because it's right. Like, that's their only motivation. Like, Superman does what's right. Why? Because it's truth, justice, and the American way. It is right. Green Lantern is a space cop. Like, he does what's right because it's lawful. The Flash is a forensic scientist for police officers. I mean, this is the Silver Age that I'm talking about, obviously.
No,
but, like, those characters do what's quote unquote right because it's what's quote unquote right. Like, that's all they think about. And where Marvel characters often have a harder time doing that, because what is the best interest of the X-Men? It's
to survive.
To crush your enemies.
Is it? Literally any answer that you say is correct, because
and there's somebody out there who's espoused that viewpoint who has been both a hero and a villain at one point or another
in the comics, and that's so complicated and great and fantastic, and that's why the Marvel Universe has the depth that the DC Universe doesn't have.
A lot of my problem with the DC Universe, not just now, but over its entire length, has been in those instances where they're trying to inject gray into a very black and white universe, because DC was completely black and white in the Silver Age. And ever since the end of the Silver Age, like, they've been trying to make it gray. And 90% of the time, they do that by basically going to the big control panel of everybody's personality and just turning the asshole dial all the way up.
I agree. Or,
and I think that is in the story.
Which is fine as long as you're going to have... one of my favorite Batman storylines is Bruce Wayne murderer, Bruce Wayne fugitive, where they do that, but there's this incredible narrative that happens between the people that goes on over. The story is only about Batman incidentally from a certain part on, because at some point it becomes about Oracle and Nightwing and Robin that are going, Batman is out, Bruce is out there, and that's the thing, it's like drawing this distinction between Batman and Bruce Wayne. And when he gets out, and if you haven't read that run, you should read it because it's great.
It's one of the first Batman runs I read.
And there's this whole thing where he's accused of a crime, he escapes from prison, and he's just running around as Batman, and everybody's like, you need to clear Bruce Wayne's name. And he's like, I am the Knight. I'm not Bruce Wayne. I'm Batman.
Bruce Wayne is the
and
mask,
everybody's
and
like,
he's dead.
No, yeah, right?
Yeah.
And it's great how, like, the characters refer to him as Bruce because that's who he is, and that's who
Dick
needs him.
Grayson.
And, like, there's this great scene with Dick Grayson, one of my favorite Batman-Superman interactions there, when Superman comes down and is like, Bruce, you need help, can I help you? And he's like, I'm not Bruce anymore, whatever. And they have this little conversation, and as Superman's flying away, he goes, you know where to find me if you need me, Bruce. And it's this great, like, little thing. But most of the time I agree with you. It's just like, here's just this personality switch for really no apparent reason other than, and it's the difference between drama and melodrama.
But here's the thing. One of my biggest problems with the story is that they turn the asshole dials on everybody way the fuck up, and there's like all this dark shit that's going on.
One specific characters.
And you have these characters from the end of Crisis, Luthor and Superboy and Superman coming in and saying, you guys have fucked up this world. It's too dark. You're not heroes anymore. Like, we're going to fix things. And the heroes go, you're trying to destroy our world. We're going to punch you until we're right. And they are kind of right, but then they're also presented as villains, and it doesn't really ever...
Well, there's that great
address
scene.
That meta text.
Well, it does. There's that great scene when they're fighting in Metropolis, and they say all of the Suicide Squad members, or the Society of Supervillain members, show up in Metropolis, and they're like, "We're going to take down Metropolis because if Superman cities fall, the rest will follow." And they're there, and people show up, and they're like, "I can't tell the difference between the villains and the heroes." They literally say that in the text, which I think is very obvious, and I hate when writers do that.
At the end of the story, they reshuffle the universe, and they're like, okay, well, things are kind of better now, and Batman found his parents' killer, and now he's he's found a measure of peace, and he's not the same gruff asshole. Like, they don't fix any of the problems through their own actions. It actually comes about because of what the villains do.
Right, and I think that specific mention of Batman's killer was caught is because they're trying to show you how the retcon worked, which I hate, and I think is a terrible thing to ever put down on paper. You should never tell me what you retconned.
Yeah.
Show me that
Certainly
in a different
not.
book.
But
I hate that.
My problem is that the heroes don't win the victory through anything that they do.
Well, they do.
Luthor tears the multiverse apart, and then they punch him, and then it kind of smacks back together into the one universe, and then magically things are better.
Well, I think that it's true that they do win through violence, and that is not always the most interesting way to do it. What you get to see, though, is a great display of willpower from Connor Kent, who has decided he never wants to be a hero anymore, coming back to be a hero and go, Nightwing, it's just me and you, and we got to take the tower down. And then Wonder Girl shows up, and he's like, "Oh, it's dangerous. You shouldn't be here." And she's like, "Well, it's dangerous. That's why I'm here, is because it's dangerous." And he never goes, "But you're a lady. Go home." He's just like, "Okay." And I like that scene. I think that's great. I think that sums up their relationship really well. And then they go punch the big device that is destroying things. They don't have Mr. Terrific or Batman or any of the smart characters because they're fucking in space trying to shut down the Omax. Like, this is... Nightwing literally says, "This is all we have. We have to go. What are we going to do?" And Connor goes, "I do what I do best. I'll punch it." And
the
maybe
more
I'm
I think
satisfying.
about it, my problem in a large part, I think, comes down to the fight between Supermen. When Superman is going, "You fucked it up, like our world was better." And Superman of Earth-1 goes, "A perfect world, your world wasn't perfect because a perfect world wouldn't need a Superman." And I think that coming from Superman, that is an incredibly nihilistic statement. That's basically going like, the thing that I'm trying to do, the world that I'm trying to create, can never exist.
Yeah.
I think there's a bunch of moments like that just kind of fall flat.
I think
for
that
me.
that...
The moment where Batman says, "The last time you inspired anybody, you were dead."
Oh, I like that scene.
Yeah, it's fucking...
Like, it undercuts its own thesis.
Yeah. And then, like, the thing is there's a similar moment in Superman for Tomorrow where Superman's, like, talking to Batman. He's like, "I don't like you." And I'm just like, no, that's fucking bullshit, right? Like, I feel like... They're not characters anymore at that point. They're just kind of caricatures. They're just like, "Oh, Batman is dark and foreboding." And
Batman's trying to inspire Superman to be great again.
Well, but I don't necessarily
And I think that he's reminding him of his fallibility and his mortality. And
I think that I don't get that from this. And that's the thing. It's like, largely, and when we disagree about comic books, I think it always comes down to this one thing, right? It's that you're willing to put effort in to a greater extent than I am past a certain point.
That's fair.
And I think I am all about comic books being like, biff, bam, pow, man. Like, I want to fucking see giant robots getting their asses handed to them, and Batman, like, doing the detective kung fu thing. I love that shit, man. That's what I read comic books for.
Detective Fu.
Detective Fu, yeah. It's a special thing. But and that's my... I mean, I will say that my favorite superhero stories are like surround that, like that's what I love.
Are you saying that Batman spent an extra non-weapon proficiency to get a specialty in Detective Fu?
Yes. I did.
I hate both of you so much.
He's also got feats and
I'm done. We're done with this metaphor.
But the whole thing is that I also appreciate the need for a meta-narrative in superhero comics, which is where you get stuff like Crisis on Infinite Earths and Identity Crisis. And I feel like it is incredibly difficult to do both of those things at the same time.
I agree.
Because you have to make sure that while you're hitting all these high notes, you need to you can't just have the melody, you have to have the rhythm as well.
It's incredibly difficult, but it's not impossible.
It's not impossible.
I will never stop taking every single writer to task.
Well, let me finish. This whole idea that, like, you can't just, when you're trying to mix those two things, it's like, you can have the crazy fucking 6-minute long guitar solo. That's great. But you need to get to that point. You can't just, your whole song can't just be a fucking guitar solo.
I agree.
And that's what I feel this is.
Well, I think that this is very much an embodiment of what is difficult about the big two comic book companies doing a series that is an event, quote-unquote event comic, because it's very difficult to hit the high notes and still play all of the character moments when you don't just have a 4-piece rock ensemble. This is like an 100-piece orchestra.
Totally.
Like there are so many characters in this book.
It's something I love. At the end of fucking like 3 days of Coachella,
and that's why
I love about this book is that there's like 200 characters on a page at the same time, and that's also something I hate about this book, which is there are 200 characters on a page at the same time, and not a very many of them get a character moment. Almost none of them get character moments.
And that's why I was saying, like, this book has its moments, but overall, I don't feel that an undertaking of this proportions was right.
And I will admit that a great part of that is probably is fucking definitely because when they did Crisis on Infinite Earths, DC was much more willing to let Marv Wolfman do what he needed to do. Yeah. You know, they were much more willing to take chances, and there was a much greater editorial agenda when this came out. And like, I don't want it to see, like, I fucking hate Geoff Johns, but that's a personal thing. Like, I will also say that he's written some good stuff.
You still like some of the stuff.
Yeah, I definitely have. It's like I said, I think Rebirth is great, and if I can detach myself from what's going on now, it's got some of my favorite scenes in it. But I think for me, it's very difficult for me to read this with the problems I have with the story and not have all this other kind of shit going on. It's just, there wasn't enough there. There needed to be more. It needed to be longer. It needed to have a better creative team on it, somebody that could tackle, and Editorial needed to let go and allow the writer, the person that was going to be at the helm of this story, to do what they needed to do and not push an editorial agenda. And
I think that that's not fair to ask of the big two. My argument at the end of the day, whether you like Crisis on Infinite Earths or Identity Crisis or whatever, like what I want the listeners and readers of mainstream comics to take away from our analysis of this and just from this in general is, should this kind of stuff exist in comics? Because I don't know that there's a clear answer. I've heard great arguments on both sides to the point of, you know, do you do event books knowing that most of the characters in your universe aren't going to get great moments of character building? You know, there are single issues of Robin that have more heart than this whole book has. And there are so many great characters and so many great writers writing at the big two that can make really interesting books. Like, do we need this? Or is this the demand of people who like a summer blockbuster and don't want to think about their comics? Can those two things coexist in the same universe? A popcorn summer punching book that contains all of the same characters that are in your very heartfelt, very, you know, well planned out books by these great writers. Like, I think back to things like Straczynski's Thor run, which got cut short by Bendis wanting to use all those characters in Siege. Totally ruins the end of that series for me.
Well, but that's the Straczynski curse, man.
Well, it is the Straczynski curse, but, like, isn't that a crime against great comics?
I mean, absolutely.
I think that my answer has to be no. There shouldn't be event books like this.
Yeah.
Because I think that there should be more event books like Identity Crisis.
That are self-contained.
Its own self-contained miniseries that does a big, grand story, but is self-contained within itself, has a beginning, a middle, and an end.
And the
Crisis
writers
on Infinite Earths was very much like that as well.
It was.
The writers of the individual comics can choose whether or not to incorporate the fallout into their own comics.
Like, we've often talked about some of our favorite moments of Civil War happen in other books and are basically just bigger characters going, yeah, Tony Stark, I don't give a shit about your little squabble. Like, it happens in...
when you see two ants fighting on the playground...
It happens in Eternals that Cade pitched on a previous episode that we should definitely talk about in the future. It happens in Nova and Annihilation, which is a part of Marvel that I absolutely fucking love. The Marvel
and
Cosmic
Annihilation
stuff.
Was a great example of the right way.
Kind of.
That series.
When you do it, when you read it in the trades, it's a lot easier. But when
basically what
it
was 4 series that all started at the same time, went 4 issues, and then there was like
Annihilation
1 through
6
book, like 1 through 6, and that was the whole thing.
Yeah, and that's I think that's
1 or 2 of those series continued after that, but that entire story was self-contained. There was no, X-Men Annihilation Wave tie-in book.
Right. Well, correct. Yeah, I mean, it was a lot less intensive than books like Civil War or, you know,
Right.
I look at the AVX shelf in a local comic book store, there's just a wall of blue because there are 400 books in that series, you know. And I read AVX very recently and looked at all those other books, and I think to myself, what possibly could go on in those books that I don't know, because it was fine, and so I picked up a few of them, and they're awful. Like, they're totally unnecessary, and it bothers me that can exist. I lean to Toby's side of it. Like, if you're gonna tell an event story, like, keep it out of all the other books, because then you don't screw
or
other
even
writers
just have
over,
a little
or...
tag note that says, to understand why Wolverine isn't in this comic, check out this book.
Well,
the
but,
editor's
even
note,
then,
I
yeah.
love.
I love
I'm
the
even
editor's
not so
note
much
too,
a
but-
fan of that. They did that recently in X-Men, where basically it was like over 2 months, 4 different X-Men books were all Battle of the Atom. So there's like Battle of the Atom #1, then like Battle of the Atom like parts 1 through 8 that were told over 2 months in 4 different books, and then Battle of the Atom issue 2 that was the capstone of that event.
Right.
And even that I don't like so much, specifically because it interrupts the ongoing story in those individual books.
What I do like, though, is books like Necrosha and Batman, Bruce Wayne, Fugitive and Murder, where it'll be like New Mutants 18, and then Uncanny X-Men 442, and then like they just jump. That story is just like those issues.
Yeah, because then you can just buy those issues.
You just buy those singular issues, and that's exactly how Bruce Wayne Fugitive worked. It
absolutely.
would be like Catwoman this number, and then Batgirl this number, and then Robin, and it was a different writer and artist in each one, so you got a lot of different
Still
perspectives.
less of a fan of that.
It's not as good.
But the thing is that I feel like I don't collect monthly titles. I buy trades, and so for me that works fine, because then I can just go and get it. I mean, it's problematic.
War Games being a great example. Batman War
Yeah,
Games.
Yeah,
I mean,
Batman
they were
worked
doing,
like that for a long time.
Batman worked like that for a very long time.
His Cataclysm
I
was
am
like
not
that, too.
a fan of. I mean, I think that you need to have your popcorn blockbuster separate from your like Oscar nominees, right? Because I think more times than not, you're going to get the first Expendables movie, which was awful because it concentrated way too much on trying to have a plot and relatable characters and not enough on big explosions, right? And you're very, very rarely are you going to get The Matrix, which kind of hit all those notes. It told kind of this very complex, philosophically charged story and had great action too. And that's the product of a lot of thinking and a lot of rewriting and and you just don't get that very often. You know, it's like it's like I said before, I love the second Rambo movie, right? But it doesn't try to be the first one, which has a very definite plot and has very.
But, I mean, I use the movie analogy very lightly.
You know what
because
well, I mean, I just use it
don't
because
have the same continuity problems.
No, that's
that
true,
comics
and
have.
that's kind of.
And I did want to mention another thing that in Blackest Night there was a tie-in in a book called Rebels, which was one of my favorite DC books that was going on at the time, and it literally was a black ring went past the ship and then like stopped at somebody in the ship or something, and they're like, "Get out of here!"
Yeah.
And like that was the tie-in. I love stuff like that.
Yeah, no, that's
and
great.
I think that when you allow writers to just continue to tell their story, regardless of what's going on in the event, I mean, it takes a lot of
that's what happens in Animal Man.
Yeah, and it takes a lot of the event characters off the table in that event. Like, obviously, the Superman writer has to just write a different story that month.
Yeah.
Because Superman's busy being in crisis, whatever.
And
like,
that's fine.
And that's
you
what I
don't get to
mean.
tell
Is
that
if
story.
you have
that opens you up to tell great stories about the supporting cast, which DC I think is really one of their strengths is that Superman is more than just Superman. There's Lois, there's Jimmy, there's Perry White, there's this whole city fucking going on. There's Metropolis, man. Metropolis is as much of a character in a well-written Superman book as Superman, in the same way that Gotham and the Bat family is. You should be able to take Superman away from Metropolis and still tell a great story that just goes over a couple issues.
And often, also, the problem with a lot of modern comics is we expect all of these books to be happening at the same time. So when you're buying, Infinite Crisis on a Wednesday, and that same Wednesday a Superman book comes out, you assume that they're taking place at the same time in the DC continuity, when they don't have to.
Yeah.
And you could tell a story about Superman where he's in the fucking future hanging out with Brainiac 5 and the Legion of Superheroes. That's fine. You can tell that in the same week that Blackest Night comes out or whatever. Because time isn't relative to this book comes out on Wednesday, and so therefore we need a tie-in. The reason the tie-ins exist is they're money grabs.
Yep.
And to all of, the fans of comics out there that are listening, and, I hope that you already know this, but, like...
Don't read Blackest Night.
Don't fucking buy those.
Yeah, no, don't.
Literally, when they put out a miniseries that's going along with a event comic, just don't fucking buy the tie-ins. Yeah. They already sell shitty as it is, but if they didn't sell any copies, we wouldn't have them.
Yeah,
really what I want is more original graphic novels.
Like ongoing graphic novel series?
No.
Sure,
like Earth 1, or mean just like
Marvel
books?
just put out Avengers, I think it's Eternal War, which was a Warren Ellis book. And it's a self-contained Avengers story that's like 100-something pages long.
I mean,
it's an original graphic novel, it's one thing, it came out, tells a big Avengers story, and then it's done.
I've been saying for a long time that...
I think Marvel is also telling, like, self-contained... semi-continuity stories and like Marvel Knights, and there's like some Daredevil book that's not the main Daredevil book that I haven't been reading that's been coming out.
Yeah.
Where it's just kind of like it's its own story that's going on.
Yeah.
That's not really being influenced by what's going on in continuity.
I mean, you have
I think that they can do stories like Identity Crisis or Crisis on Infinite Earths, or any of these other things that we've been talking about in self-contained books, whether you're releasing that as a full graphic novel by itself, or if you're serializing it over the course of the year.
I've always thought that the best way to do events is 1 month happens, 1 week of the month, Identity Crisis comes out, and the next week of the month, we assume that that's happened. That book comes out and it's done. Like, we don't need 6 issues of Identity Crisis. Like, it should just fucking come out. And if you want to make it $30, $35, like, if you want to price gouge us...
make it original graphic novel.
I don't care.
We're going to put out Identity Crisis, and it's 250 pages, and it's a $20 softcover or whatever.
Yeah.
And you just have to buy the whole thing if you want to read it.
And even if they price gouge you and are like, it's $35 for a hardcover, for, like, a 6-issue hardcover, which you're like, that is fucking outrageous. But it's your event book, and I don't have to read it if I don't want to, because what comes after it is affected by it, but I can go, well, I'll read that later when I can find it used or whatever. But it doesn't disrupt the flow of people buying comics weekly, because the whole purpose is to get that steady, continuous cash flow. Like, that's why they do the single issues, because trade paperbacks are outselling single issues by a fucking lot. Like, it's not even close. Those numbers are not tracked anywhere, except for by the companies that sell those, and they don't release their information like that. So there's no real way to tell how big the difference between sales of trades and single issues are. But even through Diamond, the numbers they don't support the fact that single issues are outselling trades. But let alone to all the bookstores that buy trade paperbacks and don't buy single issues. So trade paperbacks are the future.
Amazon sales.
Exactly. Trade paperbacks are the future of comic books. Digital single issues, maybe. Like, we still have to see if that price point gets to where people actually care enough to buy single issues of a comic book thing.
Well, it needs to be 99 cents.
I agree. But trade paperbacks are the way that most of us consume comics. It's the way that we on the show like to read them week to week. Like, they just make more sense, and we'll move towards that. And so, I think that'll happen.
It's a reaction to, trade paperbacks give you much more freedom in what you want to read, because you can just be like, well, I like this one, but fuck the rest of this. I think that's the main problem with the comics industry, is that you have a great many people that will buy bad comic books because they don't want to hold in their collection. Well, not a great many
people, but
enough
to ruin the industry.
To make them a viable demographic, and that makes me sad. I've gotten to the point where I realize you're never going to get rid of continuity completely, which I think I'm a big supporter of, but I don't think that necessarily...
We define continuity differently.
Yeah, I think there are good elements.
Continuity being that things happen and then other things happen after that is fine.
Well, it is good, yeah.
That's
but the fact that you've had 18 different retcons, and not literally, but hyperbolically, you have 18 different retcons of Batman's origin, and some he catches Joe Chill, and some it's not Joe Chill that kills his parents. This, that, and the other thing. That and when you're a slave to that, it locks you down and it kills everything. The reason that some of my favorite Batman stories were told in the Legend of the Dark Knight run, which was, I mean, it was not.
We call that out of continuity, but that still happens. It was loosely, in eras.
And the thing is that it's loosely in continuity.
Yeah.
You still have Bruce Wayne's background, but there's really no hardcore mentions of when it's happening.
Well, the difference being that when we often say continuity, when we're talking about serialized comics, we mean like Batman 558 happens chronologically before Batman 559.
Yeah.
Like that's what.
And I mean, I guess.
And in Legends of the Dark Knight, 17 doesn't have to take place in Batman's timeline before 18.
Yeah, and
like 18 could be a flashback issue. Like those could be flashback stories, right? And so that's what's great about continuity is you can tell these stories like X-Men First Class, which is a book I really liked
We
at
actually discussed this a little bit on one of the other ones of this 50th episode where we started talking about a timeline.
Yeah.
If you just created a timeline where people could write stories anywhere they wanted, then it could all be continuity.
Just say, like, Batman, or Bruce Wayne became Batman when he was 18.
Yeah.
He stopped being Batman when he was 45.
Oh, he could be like 80.
Whatever.
Yeah, no, I know.
Here's the timeline of Bruce Wayne's life, and you can set your story anywhere on the timeline.
No, I think that's great. I think it's a great idea.
I want to make a correction real quick. I'm using the word continuity when I mean canon.
Yeah.
That's
sure,
and that's
why I interrupted you, is because my favorite thing about comics is continuity.
That you can kind of, and that's the thing. It's not continuity. Is a word that gets used within the comics community to mean, oh, when Batman 258 he had a purple cape, but in the 259 he had the green cape. What happened?
Continuity is a thing that we get, is a word that we get from film.
Yeah, and canon is like, right now, there's only, after Crisis on Infinite Earths, there was no other kind of kryptonite. There was only green kryptonite. That became canon.
Yeah.
Which meant that when you looked that up, that was the ruling from them on in the DC universe. Mm-hmm. And that's what I think is the biggest detriment to telling good stories.
Well, it's holding too hard and fast
to canon.
Yeah. There needs to be some canon, but it can't be this Jack Blue.
And it's like
canon, as in like who is Batman? Well, it's Bruce Wayne. That's canon,
right?
But is that like carved in stone canon, or can you tell a story where Dick Grayson's Batman?
No, and that's the thing.
And that's what makes canon.
Totally can.
It's stuff like what Marvel was doing recently, where it's like Reed Richards is in another dimension, but then he's also in this big crossover event in New Avengers. How can that possibly be? It's like okay, both things are true.
Yeah.
They're not happening at the same time.
You just have to buy it.
You do not have to define
a
time space, because you literally have all the time in that comic universe with which to tell those stories.
Well, it's exactly what I was saying about, like when a mainstream book is, or an event book, sorry. God, I couldn't get that out. When an event was happening, the Superman book at the same time does not have to be Superman during that event. But the reason that it does exist is because it's a blatant money grab.
Oh, absolutely.
And it's shitty.
Not one of the fucking... And I've mentioned this before, and I will never stop mentioning it, because it is really a fucking money grab. Not one of the Blackest Night trade-ins had anything to fucking do with Blackest Night other than telling these unrelated stories. You could buy the 7 issues, and that was it. And as shitty a story as that was, you didn't need any help from the outside. And really, those were some of the worst parts of Blackest Night. 72 fucking issues is what Blackest Night was with all its tie-ins. The core series was 7 books.
Well, that being said, you can get some cool things happening in the side stories, but I think that that's just a mark of a great writer.
Like Green Arrow fighting zombies in Blackest Night.
I mean, like, that's cool, but that's just the work of a great writer.
Who totally gets away from some of them. By doing some crazy acrobatic shit as Oracle, right?
Yeah, but I mean, like, that's literally just a writer polishing a turd into something that is a pill you can swallow.
Absolutely.
But I think we've utterly left Infinite Crisis in dust at this point.
No, I agree.
Do we have anything else to say about that?
No.
No.
Because I feel like
Never again.
I'm angry and I want to go scream into a pillow because this book is just disgusting.
What I think that
I'm
everyone
also
who
disgusted.
listens to this should do instead
Just read it and make up your own mind.
is, well, after you've already read it because we spoiled all of it, so
yeah.
you should be playing along. But after this big three-part issue, this three-part episode 50, what I think you should do is now go read Invincible.
Yep.
Have a great time reading some really fun superhero books that aren't mired in a lot of the bullshit that this is mired in. We talked about this because it's very important to modern comics.
Yeah,
These
absolutely.
stories are incredibly important to where we are now as a comic book
Whether
community.
you like them or hate them, in the same way that Watchmen and Dark Knight were incredibly influential in the
Absolutely.
community, whether or not you like them or hate them. These are all very important books, and we wanted to speak about them, and I think it's an important thing to speak about. Because whether you like them or hate them, you have to accept the fact that these are books that changed comics. They changed, and especially at DC. But
Well, they definitely changed DC Comics. I mean, they
well,
call Crisis on Infinite the Marvelization of the DC universe for a reason.
and I think it's. I mean, I don't think we would be very good. Well, this podcast is pretty much a bunch of intellectual people that just like bitching about things, and we
Speak
call
for
it
yourself.
discussion. We call it discussion. And but really we're into ideas, right? And like it's not just the fact that we all love the sound of our own voices. It's that we like the conveyance of ideas. They're very important to us. And we feel the ideas conveyed in some of these books are worth talking about, whether we liked it or hated it. You know, it's and that's kind of why, you know, at the end of the day, it's up to you.
We needed to talk about it. And as comic book readers, I think that you should do yourself the justice of reading these. But hopefully you played along, and I'm proud of you if you made it through all of this. Thank you so much for listening to us for 50 episodes.
Yes.
We're surprised to be here, and thank you for listening. We really appreciate it. And so go take this experience. Hopefully it didn't scar you too horribly.
Yeah.
Go read some great comics that you love to
And
make up for it.
I know I'm scarred.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm definitely
and-
scarred. I will never suggest anything like this again.
This was-
I am blaming you for this
because
forever.
if you
Yeah.
hated this out there in listener land,
This was Joe's
this
fault.
was my
Email
idea.
Joe.
And you know what? I'm glad.
At Joe at viewfromthegutters.com.
But-
Email him at your hate.
Yes,
your
please do.
undying
And
hate.
and
Please.
also, you know, keep your feedback coming on our Facebook and on the page. Keep your recommendations coming because we love hearing
and
from
tell
you
us what
guys.
you thought about
Tell us
these
what you
books
thought about
and
these
why we're
books.
wrong. And
Yeah.
we will catch you guys next time. Next issue is episode is 51, and we will be reading
The Manhattan Project.
the Manhattan Project.
And there will not be any special 52 episode. We're not going to even fucking dignify
No, we're
that.
reading 52 for the 50.
No, we're not reading 52.
Yeah, so back to normal programming. Thanks for listening, guys. We really appreciate it. And
We love
we'll
you.
catch you next time. We do.
I
We
mean,
love you.
in a non-creepy platonic way.
In the creepiest way possible, I love you.
I will acknowledge your presence when passing you in the hallway.
Oh, wow.
Toby's that guy.
You just... Yeah,
Everybody.
totally.
I'll give you one of these, like the hay, where like your head comes up just a little bit, and then like I look away.
It's the nod that
Like I
lets
know
you-
you're there, I just don't want to talk to you.
Does that mean you'll actually talk to me at parties now, Toby?
It's the nod that lets you think that maybe you have a chance to move up in social status, even though in your heart you know that you're just kind of down in the mire with the rest of us.
Well, I'm pretty sure Cade would give you a big old hug.
Cade, well, yeah, because Cade
Yeah.
is the sweetest man
Ever made.
ever. Yeah,
I
totally.
am I'm over the moon at the fact that Kate actually said that he hated something.
Yeah, no,
That was a great
I
moment.
feel like that's a victory for
Yes.
Joe and me. Both.
I do. I will celebrate this as a victory. It's going to
Took 50 episodes.
Well,
Hey, well, you know, I mean, I think that just goes to show you the fucking polarizing nature of this work. And
comics in
fucking
general.
Comics in general, but especially what happened after this in DC.
yeah. So, thanks for listening, guys. We
Yep.
had like a giant Return of the King's ending on that, but we will catch you guys next time.
Wait, hold on.
No.
No, I'm just kidding.
Bye, guys.
Hold on, wait.
Bye.
Bye.